Hey dear community, this is me, the Philosophicus. My real name is Emmanuel Benzel. I'm a student in philosophy and German language at the University of Hannover in Hanover. And today I want to elaborate my argument for free will and why I think that we are free beings with either free mind, a free spirit, that can perform free actions and have a free will. And it's not proof, my argument, but I think it's a quite convincing argument if you think through it. So let me know in the comments what do you think about my argument. And now I think we will start with the video. So at first I need to define what I mean by free will. And what I mean by free will is first that an agent is able to choose his actions free of influence except of himself. That means the only cause of one's action is in oneself and not in the surroundings. An agent is able to choose his preferences, so our preferences are not what determine our actions, we are able to choose them. This is all the concept of libertarian free will, nothing new. And my third argument, part of the definition of free will, is that an agent can form an independent thought. So all our actions seem to either be determined and the limbic system just gives us an illusion of thought, or our thoughts are our cause of our action. And I want to go into the direction that our thoughts are the causes of our action, and that we can form an independent thought that has no reason to exist at all. So that's what I think is the most unexplainable thing about free will. If free will exists, then we can form thoughts that have no cause in ourself, in anything that was before ourself, like in our character and stuff, and they have no cause in the environment, and they are just caused by our will. That is, I think, the unexplainable thing. But I want to assume that we can form an independent thought, even though it looks for the time right now unexplainable, and maybe it will ever stay that way. But that is what I want to elaborate as a definition of free will. What an agent is not is that he cannot act free without influence. So, of course, we are bound to the nature of reality and can't escape it. So we can't just start flying, but we can act our free will into the deterministic world. That's my conclusion, at least. And the second thing is that we don't really need to be able to act even, we just need to be able to form thoughts that, like Stephen Hawking, can have an output through a machine or something like that. So the basis is not action, it's actually thought, and that we can think about our actions, that we can evaluate them and then choose one of them. So, what is my definition of cause and effect? Because this is the second part that will be important. Why is it important? Because if we want to disprove determinism, we first need to actually explain what we mean by determinism and how we perceive it. And determinism, to me, is a system in which the circumstances necessarily follow up into be. So, if I have a lighter and I pull the trigger, I hope trigger is the right word, then there will be a flame. Right now there is no flame because there's too windy, but there is a short flame. So there will be a flame because all these circumstances follow up into the consequence. My theory now is that A can never follow up into B. So if I have something that is there, like, okay, I know a rock wasn't created and it didn't just pop into existence, it was formed. But let's just assume there is a rock, and that rock will stay a rock as long as there are no influences from the outside, because inside the rock, the purpose of the rock is to be a rock because it was formed that way. And as long as there's no indifference in A or a second cause, the rock will stay itself, because in the end, there will be no B because it doesn't have a higher instance like a spirit or mind to make a choice. The mind, in this case, as a material explanation for free will, the spirit as a metaphysical explanation. I don't know which is true, I just think it's true that we have free will. So, if we don't have a higher instance that makes us have the opportunity of choice, then we would just be the thought that we were before plus nothing, because there's nothing that influences us. So if there's no secondary cause, no indifference, then we would be just the thought that was before, that was produced by our brain, which I mean with the mind. So we would just be the thought, and for example, the rock will say the rock. And if we would be the thought sitting in a chair, and the environment doesn't change and there's no indifference in us, then we would still be sitting in the chair all the day, because our only thought that we are is sitting in the chair. So there needs to be an indifference in us to stand up from the chair. There needs to be the thought, well, I could stand up, or I could sit in the chair, or I could, for example, walk. All these thoughts need to be there so we can even have the choice, or the deterministic choice, to do something. Or there needs to be an influence from the environment. But if all would stay the same as it all this time is, then it would just stay static and nothing would happen. So that's what I mean with A can never follow up into B. There needs to be A2, an indifference in A or A2. And that's basically my argument for free will. Like, if we can, if A can not follow up into B, but if we can perform A, but B is necessary from A and A2, how can we perform the same action that we did before? Like, how is it possible that I, for example, pick up this lighter and I put it down, pick it up, and I put it down, and while that I move my hand in the same motion that I did before, in the same idea of thought, just because I think that the same thought is, well, desirable maybe. Even desirable is starting to have an explanation for the, even desirable is wrong, because the explanation is to me that we have a free will, that if I put on a lighter, if I put it up and I put it down again and I put it up again, I do the same action twice, even though there was an indifference in me with the plus of the action before. So my action before, action A, is putting down the lighter and putting it up, and action A2 is putting it in my hand, like I just did. So I could keep it in my hand now, and I could move it up, put it down, move it up, put it down, move it up, and so on. And I could then change my hands or whatever, and change the lighter from hand to hand. But I would have to do that before I pull it up and put it down again. Because I want to have it on this side though. Because A is the thought of pulling the lighter down and pulling it up again. And B would be the thought of not doing it. A2 would be the thought of not doing it. So I would need to have a synthesis of these two thoughts. If actually all the thoughts influence each other in determinism, and all the circumstances influence each other, and thoughts are circumstances in determinism, then the action can't be the same, because the result of 1 and 1 is 2 and is not 1. But the result that I can form is 1. If I want to explain this further, I think I need to go to the next page to explain this further. Because if the cause of A is incorporated in the chain of causation of B, then the causation of the cause of A2 should also be incorporated in the chain, and A can't happen as long as there's nothing that causes A again after B has happened. And that is the case because for example, if I pull, yeah, that's a good explanation, I think. If I pour a water drop into a lake, then the lake will make waves, and if I pour a second water drop into the lake, there will be an interference of waves. And the waves need to stop again and be calm again before I can make the same wave pattern. The same wave pattern in thoughts and actions can happen even though the circumstances don't allow it, like with a lake, because there should be an interference of the different causations and the different consequences with each other to form a new consequence that isn't the one before but only has the motion of the causes from before. So what do I mean by motion? So this is the direction of causation. In a deterministic structure, there A has a direction of moving towards its purpose. That's basically my theory. So if I throw the lighter, it will first go up and then it will fall down. And this is bad example because it's a physical phenomenon, and I don't mean that kind of motion. I mean the motion. With motion, I mean the direction of something. And the direction of something is what its first cause is. So, for example, if the first cause of the universe is to expand, it will do so until something inside the universe, an indifference, or something from outside the universe will stop the expansion. And so far we can see the universe expanding. I think that's true. I'm not the scientist here, but I think the scientists are agreeing on the universe being expanding. And the direction of this first cause is to expand and to influence each other. The atoms, I mean. So it is basically moving. In our human terms, it is moving towards its purpose of expanding, and the direction is to do this by force. And its purpose is its first motion. So the first motion to expand by force is the purpose of a thing. So what does all this have to do with free will and stuff? Again, we need to focus that we are talking about a deterministic structure, and if we want to falsify our claim that free will exists, is falsify correct? I think it's correct. Then we first need to disprove determinism. So the first motion will always be incorporated into the second motion caused by A2. What I mean by that is if two atoms collide, they will not just go their separate ways again. They will be influenced by the motion that the second atom had. And that means that the nature of deterministic causation is that the motions of other things, and with motion again I mean the directions of other things will influence the direction of one thing. And if this is true of the fundamental level of deterministic structures, then it should be also true with the greater scale. This is not an argument from composition or fallacy of composition, because in a deterministic structure, the structure as a whole cannot be indifferent to itself, because then it wouldn't be deterministic anymore, right? So, for example, if the atoms collide and form each other and influence each other, then they should be viewable in the macroscopic scale. And we can view this. We can view photosynthesis, for example. Examine, I mean, views to German, sorry. We can examine photosynthesis and how these processes work, and that these influences are actually deterministic in the surroundings that we live in. But the weird thing is that we are not determined because we can do A again, even though everything should have influenced us to do B. So all these causations can never cancel each other out because they don't subtract. Subtract is a human concept, I think, to describe the change of a cause, so of a chain of causation. Because in the end there is B, and B is never nothing. I don't want to. We don't want to elaborate on the metaphor of light and energy here because it's too esoteric, and I think it's too esoteric. But let's just hang on it for a second, because light and energy never gets destroyed. Light energy never gets destroyed. It can just transform. So in the end, even though if everything would cancel each other out, so there is no observable difference anymore, there's still something. There's still the energy. So they didn't cancel each other out. And so, yeah, subtraction is a human concept to describe these judgments. So, to go back to the argument, if nothing can cancel each other out and it's all just an addition to each other and not a subtraction of things, then the addition should form something else. Like 1 and 2 is 3 and not 1. And if I put my lighter up and I put it down, I put it up and I put it down, it's actually the same thought. But if our thoughts work like the deterministic structure, which they should if everything is determined, because otherwise we are not a part of determinism anymore, right? If our thoughts don't work that way like the rest of the world works and is not determined, then we are actually free. So it should work like it works in the rest of the world. Which means that our thoughts should influence each other to make a synthesis, and not the same thought. Yeah, that's basically my argument. Like the synthesis of I go right and I go left should be I go somewhere in the middle, and not I pick right or I pick left. Of course, the synthesis can be a little bit more differentiated like that. I can say, well, the synthesis, if I go right, then I go better left, because left is a shorter way and I don't want to walk that much today. And so the synthesis can be, well, I don't walk the long way, so I walk the short way. And then the cause of the long way is incorporated into the new consequence. But, and that is the problem, I shouldn't still be able to do one and the same action, because an action needs to differentiate each other to be different in B, to make B different from A. And that's basically my whole argument. I elaborated this further in my book, Philosophie der Medias. It will be soon on Amazon, just in German for now. Like, give me a couple of weeks, then it will be out. I put the Facebook link in the description. If somebody of you wants to translate it into English, like with a translator, of course, not translated for me, but translate it into English, then they can gladly do that and read it. But for now, I want to go a little bit into the critique of my theory, because I know there can be a lot of critique. And the first one is that we're never able to calculate all the variables, at least never for sure. And that is true. we can't be able to calculate all the variables. We have a too limited mind for that, because a mind would need to be bigger than the universe to calculate everything in the universe, because we still need to make judgments. So it would need to extend the universe and be greater than that. But all the variables should still follow into B, because the direction of A and the difference to A is to become B. What I mean by that is that the direction of A to move right and the direction of A2 to move left will, if they are equal at least, will follow up into straight. If they're not equal, they will follow up a little bit to either side, but they will never become what it was before, because they are influencing each other, and the deterministic structure relies on this influence of things in each other to form a consequence. We can't just assume that there are things in a deterministic structure that don't influence other things at all. They always take an influence on things. The second argument, the critique that is against my theory, I think is a little bit better. It's the evolutionary need for security could cause B. Of course, that could be true. Like, not B, could cause B, I mean could cause A, sorry. Of course it could cause A, but there should still be a slight difference, because we didn't think A2 for no reason. A2 would give us more security, so there should be again a synthesis of the two, because otherwise the direction of B would be lost, of A2, and the indifferent one would still give us more security. So that argument is also not valid in my mind. That's basically my argument. I would love to hear what you think about it. I hope it doesn't sound too dumb, because I don't think it is. I think you need to actually think it through and think about the deterministic structure as what it is as being described. That means a structure that takes influence on each other constantly and always forms a consequence that is a synthesis of things, which makes it impossible to do the same action twice. And that's basically it. I wish you a nice day. Ciao.